Good morning from the Digital Media Center here in the United Nations headquarters in New York. It's a beautiful spring day and it's a historic day. You can't see this, but off to my left on the television screens is the signing ceremony. 171 countries, we're being told, one by one, the head of state or government or a minister representing is coming up, sitting in a leather-bound chair and signing the Paris Agreement. It's a truly historic day. My name's Rachel Kyte. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Sustainable Energy for All, and I'm the Secretary General of the United Nations Special Representative for Sustainable Energy. And I'm joined here today by my colleague, Dr. Lee, who is the chairperson of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. If you want the evidence for why we need urgent action, this is the guy, and I am really pleased to be here with him today. Just one word on Sustainable Energy for All. We're an initiative that was brought together between governments and the private sector and civil society and the energy industry, all about how to close the energy access gap cleanly and affordably, how to have a revolution in energy efficiency and energy productivity, how to increase the amount of renewables in the energy mix, and do all of that in the context of the Paris Agreement. So how can we engineer an energy transition so that we all have access to clean, affordable power, and we do it in a way in which we don't poison the planet? But I'm here today to talk to Dr. Lee, and you had a very big week last week. So last week, the Intergovernmental Panel met in Nairobi, and you, as I understand it, and perhaps you can explain to us all the significance of this, is that you agreed to actually look at 1.5 degrees. So in Paris, we agreed as an international community that we wanted to bring warming well below 2 degrees. So it was a very ambitious agreement, and you're going to have to produce the evidence that will show us what that really means. Can you explain that to us?
As you just mentioned, thank you, Rachel. As you just mentioned, the Paris Agreement invited the IPCC to consider a special report on 1.5 degree implications, and not only for the impacts, but also the matters related to the emissions pathways related to the 1.5 degrees C. Now, I'm very happy to report to you that the IPCC accepted the invitation to produce the special report, and we believe that a study on 1.5 degree is very important, not only in terms of the showing the world the aspiration of the member governments with regard to this ambitious goal, but also at the same time that it sends a very clear message to the science community that we need to look at very closely about what's happening in the climate system, what's happening in the socio-economic systems. So we are very enthusiastic about conducting this study. We have already begun our work on 1.5 degree study. At the same time, I also very happy to report to you that we do have 2 other special reports in addition to this 1.5 degree study. One is about the climate change and land use and related topics, and second is about the climate change and oceans and the cryosphere. We believe that these 2 additional special reports will have very, very significant implications for narrowing the gap in scientific knowledge in those 2 very important areas. We will begin that 2 additional special reports as soon as possible, so that the policymakers will have better understanding of what's happening in the Earth system.
So the emotion is getting to me, so forgive me for my voice, but one of the mantras in the run-up to Paris was that the science was clear, the economics were compelling, and it was just the politics that were difficult. Now we have a political agreement. How do you see, as a science-based body, the evidence body, what do you think that we need in order to be able to propel the kind of action and ambition in action in order to make Paris become real? I mean, what's the role that you can continue to play?
You know, the IPCC is a scientific assessment body analyzing the climate science, impacts, vulnerability, and the response options to deal with it. And consistently, in terms of the solution aspect of these climate change problems, consistently we have indicated that some measure of pricing mechanism with regard to the greenhouse gas emissions will be very important. But as you know, the policy measures will have to be analyzed at least in three aspects. One is its institutional feasibility. The second is the economic efficiency, and third is the environmental effectiveness. And there are no such policies that satisfy all these three criteria. And let me say this, carbon pricing is a very, very important policy measure. Every studies indicate that it has a very superior performance in terms of economic efficiency. And in certain instances, environmental effectiveness, it shows a very good performance. But generally, in terms of institutional feasibility, that pricing on carbon faces known to face a great deal of difficulties. So in that sense, I am very glad to see this morning that a number of heads of government indicated that the importance of carbon pricing in going into the implementation phase of the climate convention. In fact, the Paris Agreement, one of the main elements of the Paris Agreement, should I say that, is the implementation. So I believe that the IPCC will have a continuing responsible duty to inform the policymakers about what should be the science-based policy choice for this implementation stage.
Yeah, I think that's excellent, because I think what we see in Sustainable Energy for All, as we look at just the energy transition that's needed, is that we have, even where governments have said all the right things and are assigning all the right things today, there's what we call incoherence of policy. So, they'll have policies on the books or even laws on the books which would encourage the private sector to do one thing or the public sector to do one thing different from what we want. So no carbon pricing, perhaps some harmful subsidies on fossil fuel use, and maybe some subsidies for energy efficiency as well, but we're sort of using money, in contradiction with itself. So I think these are going to be really important. Can you talk a little bit about adaptation? The first countries to sign today have been many of the small island developing states these are the countries that in Paris really fought for an ambitious agreement on the basis that it's 1.5 to stay alive, that we really need to bring warming down or stabilize warming at a very low level. What's the role of the IPCC in adaptation, and how we are resilient to the changes we've already baked into the climate?
In fact, adaptation is a very important element in dealing with addressing climate change problems. And to be more specific about it, IPCC has 3 working groups and one task force dealing with the greenhouse gas inventories. And of those 3 working groups, working group 2 specifically deals with the adaptation aspect of the climate change problems. And compared to mitigation, should I say that the adaptation produces a considerable co-benefits in terms of the improving the well-being of the economies and societies in the region and local levels. So we have found in many instances that the national economic development plans for national economic development are very closely linked to the way the countries design the strategies for adaptation to climate change. And in fact, especially from the developing countries' perspective, sustainable development, designing sustainable development strategies must deal with how to cope with the climate change problems occurring in that region from the adaptation perspective. And the difficulty with the adaptation problems is that it is not always to delineate what would be, should I say, a planned adaptation versus a, should I say, autonomous adaptation. You know, people has capacity to adapt to changes in one's surroundings. Now, adaptation in this sense here is we need to be much more proactive, expecting the worsening climate change in the region and for the future. However, I believe that the society has a very good capacity to deal with this worsening climate change in the local and regional scales. So adaptation is very important, and adaptation is one big component of designing a sustainable development strategies.
So I've got one more question for you, and then I think we can take some questions from the crowd here. So I work for something called Sustainable Energy for All, and we're really focused on the all. And Paris is about a economic transformation, a different way of living with each other and on this planet, and it's going to take everybody, and everybody has to sort of buy into that vision in order to push the policymakers to make the changes quickly enough. As the Intergovernmental panel, as the sort of evidence base for all of this, that has in the past been criticized a little bit for being maybe not so transparent or difficult to understand. Going forward, how do you become an evidence base that can be understood by all?
Well, in fact, the IPCC has been very active in improving our communications capabilities. And we have heard in so many instances that our reports, not just the underlying report, but including the summary for policymakers, which is a highly condensed summary for a very bulky underlying reports, known to be so difficult to read and understand. So we are going to, should I say, utilize the expertise of the communication specialists right from the early stages of our assessment process. So our end product will become much more reachable to a general audience. And we believe that such a improvement in our communications capability will improve the effectiveness of our assessment activities. And we also try to be more inclusive in terms of enlarging our body of scientists, especially from the experts and scientists from the developing countries. And you just mentioned the adaptation challenge. And I believe that the adaptation challenge in developing countries will be much more imperative, much more difficult to handle than other challenges. And in that area, I believe the contributions from the scientists in developing countries will be very critical. We are going to put much our effort in recruiting very capable scientists in the developing countries, so that IPCC outputs can be much more inclusive, can be much more informative.
So thank you. So here we are in the digital media zone at the United Nations headquarters on a historic day. My name is Rachel Kyte. I am the CEO of Sustainable Energy for All. I'm here with Dr. Lee, the chairman of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. We're going to open it up for questions from this young, eager, good-looking, springtime audience here in New York. Any questions? This is your chance. Excellent. Maybe you could say who you are as well.
My name is Mikey. I'm a high school student from New York City. So the Sustainable Development Goals are very important in terms of fighting many issues in the world, and climate change is part of them. So how do you feel that climate change and environmental issues connect to many other important social issues like hunger and poverty and healthcare and things like that?
That is a very, very important question. And in fact, our last assessment, the fifth assessment report, specifically analyzes the relationship between climate change and other societal problems. We recognize that a great deal of research needs are there, and the upcoming new assessment, we will deal much more specifically about the change, about the role, should I say role, or role of climate change in terms of basic societal problems. As you know, the climate change is known as a threat multiplier. Our assessment studies indicate that in certain instances that was really the case, but in other instances that may not be the case. So we cannot say that is the climate change is the problem for certain specific societal problems. It is difficult to say that, but certainly in overall, the climate change problems is, as others would say, is multiplier in a sense of threat multiplier to many other societal problems.
Maybe I can just chip in, because I think that this great graphic really helps. So a woman can't deliver a baby safely in a clinic that doesn't have electricity, right? That electricity has to be clean, climate action, because if not, that baby's going to be born into an atmosphere where they're going to just breathe pollutants, and they're not going to be successful as a child or live to their full potential. Climate change is having a devastating impact on the oceans. This is going to have a devastating impact on the food security possibility of coastal economies, where 30% of the GDP sometimes comes from that coastal zone. So it's in the nexus, as we call it, of these goals that the solutions have to be found. And this is why all countries, and these are universal goals, and please don't believe that this is just a developing country issue. Each country has to have integrated plans for how to get to a world in 2030 where these rights are protected and these aspirations are realized. And that's tough. That's going to be tough in Colorado, just as it is in the United Kingdom, just as it is in Mali, or just as it is in Tuvalu. So this is a global agenda, and it's going to be in the intersection of the goals that progress will be made. And that's where civil society is so important, because at the community level, it's all one life, right? It's all one community. And you can make sense of this at that level much more easily than diplomats here in New York. Next question. Yeah, please.
So I understand the part about sustainability, but can you please explain the for all aspect of sustainability, future generations, things like that?
So maybe I have a go first. So let's just think about energy for all at the moment. But it could be water for all. It could be food for all. So the idea that we could build a global economy which is effectively zero net emissions, which means that the economy has to be in balance with the chemistry of the planet. Whatever we pump up into the atmosphere, we have to be able to store or pull out or prevent from going up in the first place. The idea that we can build that kind of economy with just a percentage of the people in the economy serving and meeting the needs of only a percentage of the people in the economy is just not going to work. It's not going to work because this is a social compact. This is a political agreement. Unless everybody's needs are met, then the sacrifices, the changes, the opportunities, the new jobs, etc., that will have to be realized, that's not going to be understood, and the kind of political consensus that's necessary to make the kinds of changes just won't happen. We can also just not build sustainability if it's not inclusive. So there are 1.1 billion people today who don't have access to electricity. There are 2.9 billion people today, most of whom are women, who don't have access to clean cooking. They are not going to be able to realize their full economic potential and be part of a transformation towards clean energy, be part of a new energy industry if they can't have their basic needs met. And so that's where the for all comes in. So this isn't a 1% agenda. This is a 100% agenda. And the remarkable thing is that there's been such an advance in technology, such an advance in our understanding of what we need to do, that it's possible to imagine that everybody can have electricity and that they can have it cleanly and affordably, and we can stay within the limits that we agreed in Paris were so important.
That's right. I agree with that. That's right. And in addition to that, what's important is to have our natural capital intact. Therefore, therefore, we can achieve our economic development. At the same time, we can ensure the conservation of natural environment and also ensure the sustainability of our natural capital. Now, the difficult part is how can we ensure this sustainable usage of sustainable maintenance or usage of natural capital? And I believe the agreement like Paris agreement can be a very important facilitative mechanism for all of us to be able to maintain a natural capital so that the future economic development will be on a sound footing. And in that sense, I think the mandate on the science community, should I say mandate? But the mandate on science community will be growing ever more than any time before. And we need a clear the interdependency in our study between the ecological science and the economic science, so that the economists, for instance, will be better able to estimate the value of non-market assets, value of ecological capital, value of ecological services in more proper, in more appropriate, in more acceptable manner. And that the goal will be achieved on the basis of improved scientific understanding on the workings of ecological systems, and that part of scientific knowledge will have to be provided by this excellent work of ecological science community. So we are looking forward to a close collaboration between a number of scientific disciplines, including economics, social science, ecological science, and obviously climate science too.
So thank you very much. I got the sign. We're here at the United Nations on a historic day with a great crowd of people in the room that you can't see, that I can. This is going to take everybody. This is a generational challenge. We can do this on this Earth Day. Thank you very much, and thanks to Dr. Lee for your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.